She didn't scream. She didn't cause a scene. She didn't even ask for a manager. When the gate agent sneered at her cheap hoodie and pointed a trembling finger toward the back of the line, telling the owner of the airline to know her place, Alara Vance simply pulled out her phone. One silent text message later, the engines of Flight 404 shut down, the pilot walked off the plane, and the entire terminal went dead silent. You're about to hear the true story of the most expensive mistake in aviation history, and the brutal, instant karma that followed. Don't look away. The automatic sliding doors of JFK Terminal 4 hissed open, letting in a gust of biting November wind that swirled around Alara Vance's ankles. She adjusted the oversized charcoal grey cashmere hoodie she was wearing, pulling the hood up slightly to shield her face from the harsh, fluorescent glare of the departure hall. To the untrained eye, Alara looked like an exhausted college student, or perhaps an off-duty backup dancer, comfortable, nondescript, and definitely not worth a second glance. That was exactly how she liked it. At 34 years old, Alara wasn't just a CEO. She was a titan. As the majority shareholder of Vance Global, a conglomerate that had quietly acquired Aura Airways 6 months ago, she was technically standing in her own living room. But today, she wasn't Alara Vance, the billionaire strategist who had just closed a $400 million renewable energy deal in downtown Manhattan. Today, she was just a woman who had been awake for 36 hours and desperately needed the lie-flat seat waiting for her in row 1A on the flight to Zurich. She checked her watch, a vintage Patek Philippe, the only hint of her true status, though it was largely hidden by her sleeve. 8:15 a.m. Boarding for Flight 404 was scheduled to begin in 10 minutes. She navigated the sea of rolling suitcases and frantic families, her eyes locked on the sanctuary of the priority access carpet. The red carpet, the lane that promised silence, efficiency, and a glass of champagne before takeoff. As she approached the gate, the crowd thickened. The economy line was already snaking back toward the food court, a chaotic jumble of impatient travelers. The priority lane, however, was sparse. Only a few people stood there, a pair of businessmen in sharp navy suits talking loudly about stocks, and a woman who looked like she had been shrink-wrapped in Chanel. This was Patricia Wellington. Patricia was the kind of woman who wore sunglasses indoors and held her Louis Vuitton carry-on like it was a shield against poverty. She was currently tapping a manicured nail against the counter, radiating an aura of supreme impatience. Alara didn't care about Patricia. She just wanted to board. She adjusted her backpack, a simple black leather piece that happened to be custom-made Italian hide, and stepped onto the red carpet of the priority lane. "Excuse me," a voice dripped with ice from her left. Alara paused, turning her head. Patricia Wellington had lowered her sunglasses just enough to peer over the rim. Her eyes scanned Alara from the scuffed sneakers to the messy bun, her lip curling in a mix of confusion and disgust. "Yes?" Alara asked, her voice raspy from lack of sleep. "The economy line is back there," Patricia said, pointing a diamond-encrusted finger toward the chaotic mass of people behind them. "This line is for first class and Diamond Medallion members. You're clearly lost." Alara blinked. She was too tired for this. "I'm in the right place, Ma'am." She turned back to the counter, dismissing the woman. That was her first mistake. Patricia wasn't used to being dismissed. She let out a sharp, incredulous huff, a sound like a punctured tire. "Greg," Patricia snapped, slamming her hand on the podium counter to get the gate agent's attention. "Greg, honestly, the security in this terminal is going to the dogs. You're letting people just wander in off the street now." Behind the podium stood Greg Henderson. Greg was a man who clearly derived 90% of his self-worth from the little silver badge pinned to his polyester uniform. He had a tight, bureaucratic smile and hair that was gelled within an inch of its life. He looked up from his computer, annoyed at the interruption, until he saw Patricia. His face instantly transformed into a mask of servile flattery. "Mrs. Wellington, so good to see you again. I apologize for the wait. We're just finalizing the manifest. Is everything all right?" "No, it is not," Patricia hissed, gesturing violently at Alara. "This person is trying to cut the line. It's making me uncomfortable. She looks like she's scouting for bags to steal." Greg's eyes shifted to Alara. The flattery vanished, replaced by the cold, dead stare of a petty tyrant. He took in the hoodie. He took in the sneakers. He took in the black woman, standing alone with a backpack. He didn't see the Patek Philippe. He didn't see the heavy, confident set of her shoulders. He saw a stereotype. "Miss," Greg said, his voice loud enough that the businessmen behind them stopped talking to watch. "You need to step out of this lane, immediately." Alara took a deep breath, fighting the urge to rub her temples. "I have a ticket for this flight. I'm in seat 1A. Greg actually laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a sound. "1A? Miss, seat 1A is a full-fare first-class suite. That ticket costs $12,000. "I am aware of the price," Alara said calmly. She reached into her pocket to pull out her phone, where her boarding pass was displayed. "If you'll just scan my—" "I don't need to scan anything to know you're in the wrong place," Greg interrupted, stepping out from behind the podium to physically block her path. He crossed his arms, puffing out his chest. "We have strict protocols here at Aura Airways. This lane is for our elite clientele. It is not for standby passengers, employee friends, or anyone trying to scam an upgrade." "I'm not trying to scam anything," Alara said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. "I am a paying customer, and you are being incredibly rude." "Rude?" Patricia scoffed from the side. "He's doing his job, keeping the riffraff out so the people who actually pay for the service can board in peace. Honestly, the entitlement is staggering." Alara turned her gaze to Greg. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one time to step aside and scan my boarding pass. If you don't, you are going to regret it." Greg's face turned a mottled shade of red. The threat, delivered so calmly, bruised his ego. He wasn't going to let someone who looked like her tell him what to do in his terminal. "Is that a threat?" Greg demanded, raising his voice so the nearby TSA officer would look over. "Are you threatening a flight crew member?" "Because that is a federal offense, miss. I can have you banned from this airline. I can have you arrested right now." The terminal had gone quiet. The economy passengers were craning their necks. The businessmen were whispering. Everyone was watching the young black woman in the hoodie getting dressed down by the agent. "It's not a threat," Alara said, her eyes locking onto his name tag. "Greg Henderson, Senior Gate Agent. It's a statement of fact. You have 10 seconds to scan my pass." "I'm not scanning anything," Greg spat, pointing a finger toward the back of the hall. "You are going to turn around, walk to the end of the economy line, and wait until Group 9 is called. And that's if I decide to let you on this plane at all. If I hear one more word out of you, I'm calling the police." Patricia Wellington smirked, adjusting her scarf triumphantly. "Go on, dear. Back of the bus. It's where you belong." Alara looked at Greg. She looked at Patricia. Then she looked at the sleek Boeing 777 visible through the glass windows behind the gate, a jet that her company owned, a jet that cost $300 million, a jet that was currently burning fuel, waiting for her. "Okay," Alara said softly. "Group 9. Got it." She didn't move toward the economy line, though. She stepped back, out of the red carpet lane, and leaned against a concrete pillar. She pulled out her phone. Greg sneered, turning back to Patricia with a winning smile. "I'm so sorry about that, Mrs. Wellington. Some people just don't understand the rules. Let's get you on board." "Thank you, Greg," Patricia purred, stepping forward to hand over her pass. "I'll make sure to mention your diligence in my review." As Greg scanned Patricia's ticket and the machine beeped a happy green approval, Alara Vance unlocked her phone. She didn't open the airline app. She didn't open her email. She opened her contacts and scrolled to a number saved simply as Operations, Global Director. She typed a single message: "Execute Protocol Omega. Flight 404. Immediate ground stop. Authorization code EV@010. She hit send. Then she looked up at the digital clock above the gate. 8:25 a.m. "Let's see how long it takes," she whispered to herself. It took exactly 45 seconds. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't an alarm. It was the silence. The hum of the jet bridge stopped. The lights on the gate reader behind Greg flickered and went black. Greg frowned, tapping his keyboard. "That's odd," he muttered. "System just froze." He looked up, about to apologize to the next passenger in line, when his walkie-talkie exploded with noise. It wasn't the usual chatter of baggage handlers. It was the frantic voice of the ground crew. "Gate B12, this is Tower. You have an immediate stop order. Repeat, immediate stop order. Do not board. Do not release the bridge. We have a code 0. Greg's face went pale. Code 0? He had worked for the airline for 15 years and had never heard a code 0. That sounded like a bomb threat. That sounded like terrorism. "Tower, this is Henderson at B12, Greg stammered into his radio. "Say again. We are mid-boarding. What is the nature of the emergency?" The radio crackled again, but this time the voice was different. It was deeper, calmer, and terrified him much more than the tower controller. It was the voice of the captain. "Greg, this is Captain Harris." The pilot's voice boomed through the radio, loud enough for the passengers at the front to hear. "I've just been locked out of the flight management computer. The entire aircraft just went dark. I've got a message on my primary display. It says owner override. Greg, who is at the gate?" Greg stared at the radio, confused. "What? Who is at the gate?" "Just passengers, Captain. We're boarding first class." "No," Captain Harris snapped it. "The system is telling me the chairman of the board has initiated a shutdown. Greg, look at the manifest. Is Alara Vance on this flight?" Greg froze. The blood drained from his face so fast he felt dizzy. Alara Vance. He knew the name. Everyone in the company knew the name. She was the shadow figure who had bought the airline. She was the woman on the cover of Forbes last month. She was the one who signed the checks. He looked at the computer screen. It was black. He looked at the passengers. He saw the businessmen. He saw Patricia Wellington, looking annoyed that the line had stopped. And then he looked at the pillar. The woman in the hoodie was still there. She wasn't looking at her phone anymore. She was looking at him. Her expression was perfectly neutral, but her eyes were boring a hole through his skull. She slowly lowered her backpack to the floor. "Greg?" Captain Harris's voice demanded over the radio. "I need an answer. Is Alara Vance at the gate?" Greg's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the woman. Alara pushed off the pillar and took one step forward. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. She didn't walk to the economy line. She walked straight up to the red carpet, right past a stunned Patricia Wellington. She stopped in front of the podium, resting her hands on the counter. She leaned in, her face inches from Greg's sweating forehead. "Hello, Greg," she said, her voice smooth as silk and cold as liquid nitrogen. "I believe you asked me to wait for Group 9. The silence that fell over Gate B12 was heavier than the jet sitting on the tarmac. It was a suffocating, physical weight. Greg Henderson's mouth was still slightly open, his eyes darting between the black screen of his computer, the radio in his trembling hand, and the woman standing before him. Alara Vance didn't blink. She didn't gloat. She simply stood there, radiating a kind of gravitational pull that made everyone within a 30-foot radius terrified to move. "I asked you a question, Greg," Alara repeated, her voice low and even. "You told me to wait for Group 9. You threatened to call the police. I'm waiting for you to follow through." Greg swallowed. It was a loud, dry click in his throat. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile the image of the hoodie girl with the terrifying reality of the name Alara Vance. He had seen the internal memos. He had seen the corporate videos. Vance Global, the new parent company. She wasn't just a VIP. She was the hand that fed him. Miss Vance," Greg stammered, his voice cracking. I didn't know. I mean, the system didn't flag you. Your attire." "My attire?" Alara raised an eyebrow. She looked down at her hoodie, then back at him. "Does my attire change the validity of the ticket I purchased? Does it change the fact that I am the chairwoman of the board of directors for this airline?" No, of course not." Greg waved his hands frantically, sweat beading on his upper lip. "It's just, we have protocols, visual assessments. I was just trying to protect the integrity of the priority lane for our valued customers." "Valued customers," Alara echoed, her gaze shifting slowly to Patricia Wellington. Patricia, unlike Greg, had not yet grasped the gravity of the situation. She lived in a world where money was a shield that protected her from consequences, and she was currently inconvenienced. To her, this wasn't a corporate takeover. This was a delay caused by a delinquent. "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Patricia snapped, throwing her hands up. The jingle of her gold bracelets cut through the tension. "Greg, stop groveling to this. This hacker. Did you hear what the pilot said? She shut down the plane. That's sabotage. That's terrorism." Patricia turned on Alara, her face twisting into a mask of righteous indignation. "I don't know what kind of cyber trick you pulled with your little phone, darling, but you are in serious trouble. You think you can just walk in here, dressed like a vagrant, and hold a plane full of wealthy people hostage?" Alara turned her head slowly to face Patricia. The movement was predatory. "Mrs. Wellington, is it?" "That's right," Patricia spat. "And I am a Diamond Medallion member. My husband is a partner at Sterling and Cooper. I know people, and right now I'm going to make sure you're arrested." Patricia grabbed her handbag and fished out her phone. "I'm calling the police, right now. You're going to jail, and I'm going to press charges for distress and delay." Greg looked like he wanted to vomit. He reached out a hand to stop her. "Mrs. Wellington, please, don't..." "No, Greg," Alara interrupted, holding up a hand. "Let her call." Alara's lips curled into a faint, dangerous smile. "In fact, I insist. Call the Port Authority police. Tell them there is a security breach at Gate B12 involving the airline owner. I'd love to have a chat with them." Patricia scoffed, dialing 911 with aggressive stabs of her finger. "Airline owner. You're delusional. You're probably on drugs." She put the phone to her ear, tapping her foot. "Yes, police. I'm at JFK Terminal 4. There is a woman here who has hacked an aircraft computer and is threatening passengers. She's mentally unstable. Send someone immediately." While Patricia screamed into her phone, the ground crew door behind the podium burst open. A man in a navy blue suit, breathless and looking like he was on the verge of a cardiac event, sprinted out. It was David Ross, the station manager for Aura Airways at JFK. He was the boss of everyone in the terminal. "What is going on?" David yelled, scanning the scene. Operations is screaming that Flight 404 has been ground-stopped by a corporate override. Who authorized—" He stopped dead when he saw Alara. David Ross knew exactly who she was. He had met her once at a gala in London, where she had memorized the names of his children after a 5-minute conversation. He knew her reputation: brilliant, fair, but absolutely intolerant of incompetence. "Ms. Vance," David breathed, the color draining from his face. He rushed past Greg, nearly knocking the gate agent over, and bowed his head slightly. "Ms. Vance, I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea you were flying commercial today. If we had known, we would have had the VIP escort team." "I didn't want the VIP team, David," Alara said, her voice still eerily calm. "I wanted to get on my flight. I wanted to sit in the seat I paid for, but apparently my money isn't good enough for Greg here." David spun around to face Greg. His eyes were wide with panic. "Greg? What did you do?" She was in the priority line," Greg squeaked. "She didn't she refused to leave when I told her to go to economy." "You told the CEO of the company to go to economy," David whispered, the horror dawning on him. "He did more than that," Alara corrected. "He refused to scan my boarding pass. He publicly humiliated me. He threatened to have me arrested, and he implied that because of the color of my skin and the hoodie I'm wearing, I must be a thief, scouting for bags." David closed his eyes for a brief second, as if praying for a sinkhole to open up and swallow the entire terminal. When he opened them, his face was hard. He looked at Greg with pure disdain. "Give me your badge," David said. "What?" Greg gasped. "Your badge, Greg, and your login token, now." "David, wait, Now!" David roared, causing several passengers to jump. Trembling, Greg unpinned the silver wings from his shirt and placed them on the counter. He looked like a man watching his life dissolve. "But wait a minute!" Patricia Wellington stepped forward, snapping her phone shut. "You can't be serious. You're firing him for doing his job? This woman is a criminal. The police are on their way." David looked at Patricia, bewildered. "Ma'am, this woman owns the airline. She owns the plane. She owns the lease on this terminal gate. If she wants to paint the plane pink and fly it to Mars, she can." Patricia froze. She looked at Alara, then back at David, then at the sleek jet outside. The gears in her mind were grinding, trying to process the impossibility of it. The hoodie girl was a billionaire. Well, Patricia faltered, her face flushing a deep, blotchy red. "Well, she certainly doesn't look like it. How was anyone supposed to know? It's entrapment, really. Poor Greg was just following protocol." "Protocol?" Alara stepped closer to Patricia. The air between them crackled. "Protocol dictates that you treat every paying passenger with respect. Protocol does not include profiling. Protocol does not include sneering at people because you think they are beneath you." Alara turned to David. "David, is the flight crew deplaned?" "Captain Harris is packing up now, Miss Vance," David said. "The engines are off." "Good," Alara said. "Cancel the flight." The gasp that went through the crowd was audible. "Cancel it?" David asked, shocked. "Ms. Vance, there are 300 passengers." "Cancel it," Alara repeated firmly. "Flight 404 is officially scrubbed. Issue a refund to every single passenger in economy. Give them a voucher for double the value of their ticket and put them on the next available flights with our partner airlines. Comp their meals and hotels." "And the priority passengers?" Patricia asked, her voice shrill. "What about us? I have a gala in Zurich tonight." Alara looked at Patricia with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The priority passengers," Alara said, "will receive a full refund. However, they will not be rebooked on Aura Airways." "Excuse me?" Patricia shrieked. You heard me, Alara said, her voice projecting so the businessmen behind Patricia could hear. I am instituting a new policy, effective immediately. Any passenger who stood in this line and watched Greg abuse a customer without saying a word, and especially you, Mrs. Wellington, who cheered him on, is no longer welcome on my aircraft. You can't do that, one of the businessmen in the blue suits shouted. I'm a platinum member. Do you know how much business I bring this airline? Not enough to matter to me, Alara shot back, her voice steel. I don't need your money. I have plenty of my own. What I need is a customer base that has a shred of human decency. She turned back to David. Flag their passports in our internal system. No fly list for Aura and all subsidiaries. Indefinite ban. This is insane, Patricia screamed. She lunged forward, grabbing Greg's arm. Greg, do something, tell them! But Greg was staring at the floor, a broken man. At that moment, the wail of sirens cut through the air outside the terminal glass. Blue and red lights flashed against the windows. Alara checked her watch. Ah, that must be the police Mrs. Wellington called. She looked at Patricia, whose face had gone from red to a terrifying shade of pale white. You called the police to report a terrorist act, didn't you, Patricia? Alara asked softly. You told them I hacked the plane, that I was a threat to national security. Patricia's lip trembled. I thought... Filing a false police report is a crime, Alara stated. Accusing a federal aviation owner of terrorism is... Well, let's just say the FBI doesn't have much of a sense of humor about that. Two Port Authority officers, hands resting near their holsters, jogged through the automatic doors, scanning the crowd. Who called 911? One of the officers barked. We have a report of a hijacking in progress. The crowd parted instantly, leaving Alara, David, Greg, and Patricia standing in the center of the circle. Alara stepped forward. She looked like a queen, despite the sneakers. Officers, she said calmly, there is no hijacking. I am Alara Vance, owner of this airline. I authorized a ground stop for safety protocols. The officer frowned, looking at David. David nodded vigorously. She's the owner, officer. It's an internal corporate matter. The officer relaxed slightly, but his partner narrowed his eyes. We got a call about a cyber attack and a mentally unstable woman threatening passengers. Who made that call? Alara slowly raised her hand and pointed a single finger at Patricia Wellington. She did, Alara said. And she's right about one thing, officers. There has been a disturbance of the peace. I'd like to file a formal complaint against that woman for harassment and making a false report of terrorism. Patricia let out a strangled sob. No, I didn't. It was a mistake. Officer, Alara continued, her voice hard. She caused a panic in a federal transportation hub. She wasted your resources, and she has been verbally assaulting me for 20 minutes. The officers turned to Patricia. The first-class snobbery evaporated, replaced by the primal fear of a woman who realized her Chanel bag couldn't save her from handcuffs. Ma'am, the officer said, stepping toward Patricia, we need to see your ID. I am Patricia Wellington, she stammered, backing away. My husband is... I don't care who your husband is, the officer snapped, pulling out his notepad. You called in a fake hijacking. Do you have any idea the level of response you just triggered? We have SWAT rolling on the tarmac right now. Patricia's knees gave out. She grabbed the counter for support. Alara leaned in close to Greg, who was still standing there, badgeless and terrified. Watch closely, Greg, she whispered. This is what happens when you judge a book by its cover. The story ends badly for you. Alara turned to David. David, handle the police. Make sure the security footage of this entire interaction is pulled and sent to my legal team. I want everything documented. Greg's sneer, Mrs. Wellington's accusations, all of it." "Yes, Miss Vance," David said. "And what about you? The flight is cancelled." Alara looked at the empty jetway. She was exhausted. Her bones ached, but she felt a fire in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. "I'm not going to Zurich today," she said. "I have some work to do here. I want a full audit of the JFK ground staff. I want to know exactly how deep this rot goes. If Greg felt comfortable acting like this, he wasn't the only one." She hoisted her backpack onto her shoulder. "Get me a conference room," she ordered, "and get HR on the phone. We're going to clean house." As Alara turned to walk away, she didn't look back at the officers questioning a weeping Patricia, or at Greg, who had sunk into the chair behind the podium with his head in his hands. But as she walked past the long line of economy passengers, the people Greg had sneered at, the people who had watched the whole thing, something happened. It started with one person, a young man in a worn denim jacket. He started clapping. Then the woman next to him joined in. Then the family behind them. Within seconds, the entire terminal erupted in applause. It wasn't polite golf claps. It was a roar of approval, a thunderous cheer for the woman in the hoodie who had just leveled the playing field. Alara kept walking, keeping her face neutral. But for the first time that day, the corner of her mouth twitched upward. She had missed her flight. She had lost a massive contract meeting in Zurich. It would cost her millions. Worth it, she thought. But the story wasn't over. Alara Vance knew that people like Patricia Wellington and Greg Henderson didn't just go away. They retaliated. And as she walked toward the VIP lounge to set up her war room, her phone buzzed. It was a notification from a news app. Breaking. CEO meltdown at JFK? Social media explodes with video of hoodie billionaire cancelling flight. Alara stopped. She opened the video. It was recorded from a bad angle, edited to make her look like the aggressor. It cut out Greg's insults. It cut out Patricia's racism. It just showed Alara threatening to ban everyone. The caption read, "Billionaire tyrant ruins Christmas for 300 families." Alara looked up from her phone, her eyes narrowing. "So that's how they want to play it," she whispered. She turned around and looked back at the gate. Greg was on his phone now, typing furiously. Patricia was talking to the police, pointing at Alara, her confidence returning as she spun her web of lies. The war hadn't ended. It had just moved to a new battlefield. The walk from Gate B12 to the Aura Airways first-class lounge was usually a victory lap for Alara Vance. Today, it felt like a perp walk. Every television screen in the terminal seemed to be broadcasting the same grainy, shaky footage. The video, uploaded by an anonymous account named TruthSeeker99, was a masterclass in manipulation. It started midway through the confrontation, conveniently cutting out Greg's sneer and Patricia's racial slurs. In the clip, the world only saw Alara pointing a finger at a cowering Greg, her voice cold and commanding. "I'm instituting a new policy. You are no longer welcome on my aircraft." It zoomed in on Patricia Wellington's tear-stained face as she cried out, "I have a gala in Zurich," making her look like a distressed grandmother rather than a bully. By the time Alara reached the frosted glass doors of the lounge, the hashtag #AshaBillionaireBully was trending #1 globally. Alara swiped her keycard, her hands shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from a rage she was struggling to contain. She entered the private owner's suite at the back of the lounge, a soundproof glass cube overlooking the tarmac. She threw her backpack onto the mahogany conference table and collapsed into a leather chair. Her phone rang. It was Marcus Sterling, the lead investor on her board of directors, and, coincidentally, the senior partner at the firm where Patricia's husband worked. Alara. Marcus's voice was smooth, but with the sharpness of a jagged rock. Care to explain why our stock has dropped 4% in the last 20 minutes? My phone is blowing up. Patricia Wellington is saying you suffered a psychotic break. Patricia Wellington is a liar, Marcus, Alara said, pinching the bridge of her nose. She and the gate agent profiled me. I responded. The video says otherwise, Marcus countered. It looks bad, Alara, really bad. You look like a tyrant crushing the working man. The union is already drafting a statement supporting Greg Henderson. They're calling him a hero who stood up to corporate abuse. Alara stared at the ceiling. It's edited, Marcus. I need the security footage from the gate. It will show everything. You better hope so, Marcus warned, because if you don't have proof by the time the market closes, the board is calling for an emergency vote of no confidence. You might own the airline Alara, but we can still strip you of your CEO title. You have 2 hours. The line went dead. Alara slammed the phone down. She turned to the large monitor on the wall and switched it to the local news. A reporter was standing outside Terminal 4, microphone in hand. Next to her stood Greg Henderson. Greg had recovered remarkably fast. He was no longer the trembling coward. He was now playing the role of the downtrodden martyr. He wiped a fake tear from his eye. I just tried to do my job, Greg told the camera, his voice quivering for effect. She came in wearing a hoodie. She looked suspicious. I have a duty to protect my passengers, and for that, she fired me. She destroyed my livelihood because I wouldn't let her cut the line. The reporter nodded sympathetically. A David and Goliath story, folks. But this time, Goliath won. Alara felt the bile rise in her throat. They were winning. The lie was traveling around the world while the truth was still putting its shoes on. She needed David Ross. She hit the intercom button on the desk. David, get in here. The station manager entered a moment later, looking pale. He was holding a tablet. We have a problem, Miss Vance, David said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I know, Alara said. The news. I need the CCTV footage from Gate B12, David. Now. We release the raw tape. We destroy their narrative. David swallowed hard. He placed the tablet on the table. I went to security, David said. The files for Gate B12, they're gone. Alara froze. What do you mean, gone? Corrupted, David said. Or more likely, deleted. The head of Port Authority security at this terminal plays golf with Greg Henderson every Sunday. He claims there was a server malfunction at exactly 8:15 a.m. Alara laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Of course, the Old Boys Club. It gets worse, David continued. Patricia Wellington has just hired a crisis PR firm. They are organizing a press conference in the main terminal atrium in 30 minutes. She's going to announce a lawsuit against you for emotional distress and defamation. She's going for the kill, Alara. Alara walked to the window, looking out at the grounded Flight 404. She was cornered, no video evidence, a board of directors ready to oust her, a public that hated her, and 2 liars preparing to dance on her professional grave. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She thought about her father, who had started the business from a garage. He used to tell her, if they lock the front door, you check the back. If they lock the back, you take the chimney. David. Alara opened her eyes. They were blazing. Is Flight 404 still powered down? Technically, yes. The pilots are gone. Why? The cockpit voice recorder, Alara said. And the external flight deck cameras. David shook his head. The CVR only records audio in the cockpit. It wouldn't catch the conversation at the gate podium. And the external cams point at the runway, not the terminal. Not those cameras, Alara said, a dangerous smirk forming. The boarding cameras, the ones we installed 6 months ago for facial recognition testing, the ones that aren't connected to the airport security server. David's eyes went wide. The beta system, the one that feeds directly to the cloud at headquarters. Exactly, Alara said. Greg's friend can delete the airport files, but he can't touch my servers. But, David hesitated, that system only records video. No audio. Without audio, it's just you looking angry and Greg looking scared. It doesn't prove what was said. It doesn't prove the racism. Ilara's smile vanished. He was right. Without the audio of Patricia calling her riffraff or Greg refusing to scan her ticket, the video could still be spun. She needed sound, and she had nothing. Just then, her phone buzzed again. An email. Subject, you might want to see this. From unknown. Alara frowned. She opened the email. There was no text, just a link to a YouTube unlisted live stream. She clicked it. Alara sat in the soundproof owner's suite of the lounge, watching her reputation burn on the wall-mounted monitors. The news cycle was ruthless. The edited clip released by the trolls made her look like a tyrant, and the hashtag #billionaire bully was trending globally. The board had given her 2 hours to resign before they ousted her. She was cornered, out of options, and running out of time. Then her phone buzzed with an email. Subject, you might want to see this. From J. Martinez Vlogs. Alara clicked the link. It wasn't grainy security footage. It was a video shot from a smartphone held at waist height, the perspective of someone sitting on the floor in the economy line. The angle was low, but the audio was crystal clear. The economy line is back there. You're clearly lost, Patricia's voice rang out, dripping with disdain. Then came Greg's sneer, loud and arrogant. I don't need to scan anything, scouting for bags to steal. It was all there. Every racial slur, every insult, every threat. The video panned to show Alara standing calmly while they berated her. The sender was Javier Martinez, the young man in the denim jacket who had started the slow clap at the gate. David! Alara shouted. The station manager rushed in, looking pale. Find Javier Martinez. He's in the terminal waiting for a voucher. Bring him here, now. 10 minutes later, a terrified Javier was ushered into the suite. He clutched his phone like a lifeline. Ms. Vance, I'm a huge fan. I didn't post the full video because I only have 12 subscribers. Nobody would have seen it. They will now, Alara said, her eyes cold and calculating. Javier, I'm going to buy the rights to that footage. David, connect Javier's phone to the main terminal broadcasting system. Override the departure screens. David gasped. You want to hijack the airport feed? The board will kill you. I own the lease on those screens, Alara said, hoisting her backpack. It's a company-wide announcement. Let's go. Down in the main atrium, the situation was dire. Patricia Wellington stood on a makeshift podium surrounded by flashbulbs, wiping away fake tears. Greg stood beside her, playing the victim perfectly for the cameras. My client is traumatized. Patricia's lawyer droned into a bouquet of microphones. We are suing for $20 million in damages. Greg stepped up, sobbing. I just did my job. She fired me because I wouldn't let her cut the line. Suddenly, a screech of audio feedback pierced the air. The crowd covered their ears. The massive LCD flight boards behind Patricia, usually listing destinations, flickered and went black. In their place, the vertical video appeared, magnified to 50 feet tall. Go on, dear. Back of the bus. It's where you belong. Patricia's voice boomed through the terminal like thunder, amplified by the PA system. On the podium, she froze. The video continued, playing Greg's accusation about stealing bags for the entire airport to hear. The crowd's sympathy evaporated instantly, replaced by a collective gasp of shock. Alara appeared at the top of the grand staircase, still wearing her hoodie, a microphone in hand. "Excuse me," her voice echoed over the speakers. Patricia spun around, looking like a deer in headlights. Alara descended the stairs slowly, the eyes of every reporter fixing on her. "I believe you just told the press you don't see color, Mrs. Wellington." She pointed to the giant screen where the video looped Patricia's insults. "That video is the truth, and Greg didn't just do his job. He violated 3 federal anti-discrimination laws in under 2 minutes. Alara stopped in front of the cameras, looking directly at the cowering Greg. "You said you have kids to feed, Greg? You should have thought about them before you treated a human being like garbage. You will never work in aviation again." The reporters swarmed the podium, shouting questions at the now fleeing Patricia. The narrative had flipped in seconds. Alara stood amidst the chaos, watching them run. The truth was out, but she wasn't done yet. She still had to face the board. The atrium of JFK Terminal 4 had cleared out, but the war was far from over. If anything, the humiliation of Patricia Wellington had only poured gasoline on the fire. Alara sat at the head of the long obsidian conference table in the Aura Airways boardroom, located in the penthouse of a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. It was 8:00 p.m. She had been awake for nearly 48 hours. The room was filled with the 12 members of the board of directors, mostly older men in expensive suits who looked at Alara with a mixture of fear and disdain. They were the money men, the ones who cared only about the green line going up. Today, the red line had gone down. Hard. "You publicly shamed the wife of Richard Wellington," hissed Marcus Sterling, the lead investor. He threw a stack of papers onto the table. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Alara? This isn't just about a flight delay anymore. You've declared war on one of the most powerful legal families in New York." "She lied, Marcus," Alara said, her voice steady, though her eyes were burning with fatigue. "She filed a false police report. She racially profiled me. I defended the company's integrity." "Integrity doesn't pay dividends." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "Richard Wellington called me 10 minutes ago. He's not just suing for defamation. He's launching a class action lawsuit on behalf of every passenger delayed by your stunt at the gate. He's claiming you are mentally unfit to lead a public company. He's going to bury us in litigation until the stock hits 0. Alara looked around the room. The faces were stony. They were scared. The Wellingtons were social royalty, and Alara was the disruptor who hadn't learned her place. "So what do you suggest?" Alara asked. "I apologize. I let them win." "You settle," Marcus said coldly. "Richard has offered a deal. You issue a public apology to Patricia. You reinstate Greg Henderson with back pay. You resign as CEO and move to a non-executive chairman role. In exchange, they drop the lawsuits." The silence in the room was deafening. They wanted her head on a platter. Alara stood up. She walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "Greg Henderson humiliated a paying customer," Alara said softly. "Patricia Wellington tried to have me arrested for existing. And you want me to apologize to them?" "We want to save the company," Marcus said. "You have 24 hours to sign the settlement, Alara. If you don't, the board will vote to remove you for cause. Gross negligence causing reputational damage. We have the votes." Alara turned around. She smiled, but it was a terrifying thing. "You think you have the votes, Marcus?" she asked. "Then you better count again, because I'm not resigning, and I'm definitely not apologizing." "Then you're finished," Marcus spat. Alara grabbed her backpack. "We'll see. Meeting adjourned." She walked out of the boardroom with her head high, but inside she was spiraling. She knew Marcus wasn't bluffing. Richard Wellington was a shark. He would tear her life apart, piece by piece. She needed air. She needed to think. She took the elevator down to the lobby and walked out into the cold night air. A black town car was waiting for her, but she waved it away. She started walking down Fifth Avenue, her hoodie pulled up. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the 24-hour diner on 42nd and 8th. Come alone. I know something about Greg Henderson." Alara stared at the screen. It could be a trap. It could be a reporter. But she had no other cards to play. She hailed a taxi. 42nd and 8th. Step on it. Alara stormed out of the boardroom, the threat of the board's vote hanging over her head like a guillotine. Marcus Sterling had given her 24 hours to resign or face total destruction. She needed a miracle. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the diner on 42nd and 8th. Come alone. I have dirt on Henderson." Alara arrived to find the diner nearly empty. In the back booth, huddled over a cup of black coffee, sat Captain Harris, the pilot of the grounded Flight 404. "Captain." Alara slid into the seat opposite him. "I thought you'd be halfway to Zurich on a partner flight." "I don't fly for thieves," Harris grunted, his voice gravelly. He looked tired. "And I don't let good people get fired for bad reasons." He reached into his leather jacket and slid a crumpled piece of thermal paper across the greasy table. Alara picked it up. It was the weight and balance load sheet, the official manifest for the cancelled flight. "Look at seat 1B, Harris pointed. "Patricia Wellington, occupied. Now look at the payment code at the bottom." Alara squinted at the tiny print. "Override auth. GH spend Z4. GH is Greg Henderson," she whispered. "What is spend for?" "It's a non-revenue positive space code," Harris explained, his voice low. "It's meant for employees flying for emergency duty. It tickets the seat for $0. The system thinks she's a deadheading pilot." Ilara's eyes went wide. She didn't pay for the ticket? Oh, she paid, Harris smirked. But she didn't pay the airline. Greg drives a Porsche on a $60,000 salary, Alara. He sells premium seats for cash under the table, pockets the money, and uses the employee override code to get them on board. The airline gets nothing, and the passenger flies first class for half price. The pieces clicked together with terrifying clarity. Patricia wasn't just an entitled snob, she was an accomplice to corporate embezzlement, and her husband, Richard, was leading a lawsuit against the very company his wife was defrauding. "This is it," Alara breathed, clutching the paper. "This is the smoking gun." "There's more," Harris added. "If you check the logs, I bet you'll find she's been flying non-rev for years." Alara stood up, her fatigue replaced by a cold, burning adrenaline. She shook Harris's hand. "Captain, get some rest. You're going to have your pick of routes when this is over." She stepped out into the cold New York night and dialed David Ross immediately. "Wake up the IT forensics team," she ordered, her voice cutting through the wind. "I need a search for every instance of code GH-SPEND 0044 from the last 5 years. We're about to find millions in stolen revenue." "And David?" she added, a predator's smile forming. "Call Marcus. Tell him I'm ready to negotiate. Tell him to bring the Wellingtons tomorrow morning. I'm not going to surrender. I'm going to bury them." The morning sun sliced through the Vance Global boardroom, but the atmosphere inside was toxic. Richard Wellington threw a leather binder onto the obsidian table with a heavy thud. Beside him, Patricia sat like an ice queen, while Greg Henderson fidgeted nervously in the corner. "The deal is simple," Richard announced, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You resign, Alara. You reinstate Greg. You issue a public apology to my wife. In exchange, we drop the class action lawsuit." Marcus Sterling, the treacherous board member, nodded. "It's the only way to save the stock, Alara. Sign it." Alara didn't touch the pen. Instead, she slid a single sheet of thermal paper across the table. "Before I sign," Alara said, her voice dangerously calm, "I have one question. Patricia, why haven't you paid for a flight in 4 years?" Richard scoffed. "Don't be absurd. She's a Diamond member." "She is a stowaway," Alara corrected. She pointed to the paper. "My team ran a forensic audit last night. We found a legacy code, GH Spend 004. It's a manual override for free employee emergency travel. Greg has used it 300 times. 250 of those were for Patricia." The room went deathly silent. Alara stood up and walked toward Greg. "It's a perfect scam," she continued. "Patricia pays you cash, half price, under the table. You pocket the money, print a free ticket using the override, and the airline gets zero. That is $3.2 million in corporate theft." Richard turned slowly to his wife, his face draining of color. "Patricia, tell me you didn't pay him cash." "I saved us money," Patricia shrieked, her composure shattering. "Why pay full price when Greg could fix it? Everyone does it." "You just confessed to federal wire fraud," Alara said coldly. "And Richard, since your firm represents our insurer, you're now an accessory to the crime you're suing us for." Alara pressed the intercom. "Now!" The double doors burst open. FBI agents swarmed the room. Before Greg could stand, he was cuffed. Patricia screamed as she was hauled out of her chair, wailing about her status, while Richard sat with his head in his hands, watching his career incinerate. As the silence returned, Alara turned to a terrified Marcus. She picked up her resignation letter and ripped it in half. "You're fired for gross incompetence," she said. "Get out of my building." 3 months later, Alara stood at the back of the economy line at JFK. She watched a new gate agent kindly help a struggling mother with her bags. No sneers, no judgment. Alara smiled, pulled up her hood, and boarded the plane. The turbulence was finally over. And that is the true story of how Alara Vance didn't just cancel a flight. She cancelled an entire corruption ring. It serves as a brutal reminder. True power doesn't need to shout, and it certainly doesn't need to cut in line. Patricia Wellington and Greg Henderson learned the hard way that when you judge someone by their appearance, you might just be insulting the person who signs your paycheck. What do you think? Was Alara's revenge too harsh, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story of instant karma, please hit that like button, share this video with a friend who hates entitled people, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind, because you never know who you're talking to.